Hi there, and welcome to Cretin Classics. I'm Davey Cretin, and please welcome my special guest. You know him from the Contrarians, you know him from Daydream Nation, Grant's Rock Warehouse, and a ton of other YouTube channels. Mr. Pete Jones from the
Hey,
Midwest.
how are you, Davey?
Excellent. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be asked. Thank you. Thank
And
you
we
so
were
much.
we were discussing this, what band we would do our top 12 tunes from, and it was Pete's idea to do the mighty Queensryche from Seattle, Washington.
Yep.
And they started in the early 80s and they've been a going concern ever since. Obviously, a while back they had a bunch of problems and now they're just down to two original members, Eddie Jackson on bass and Michael Wilton on guitar, but they're still going with a new lineup and still rocking and rolling. And I always thought that they were like thinking man's metal because they didn't do the usual fare of party type songs like Girls and Rock and Roll and Cars. Very cerebral and a little different. And they took a cue from Rush, maybe a little bit of Fate's Warning. They came up at the same time. And then Dream Theater sort of took from them. So it's progressive metal. And they started out a lot heavier and then they sort of streamlined and became more song oriented in the early 90s, let's say.
Right.
And then unfortunately, one of their leading lights, Chris DeGarmo, left, which was a darn shame to me anyway.
Huge
They've
blow.
been a little bit of a different band ever since. So we're here to count our top 12 songs down. So, and then if there's time at the end, we'll do some honorable mentions. So, Pete, why don't you start us off with your number 12 and 11, please?
Very good. Again, this is an honor to be here. Thanks, Davey. This is a band that is super special to me. Discovered them when the EP came out.
Wow.
I've been with them ever since. There's some real highs, there's some sad lows, but like a good smile on an afternoon, it comes back up on the other side. And that's where I'm starting. Number 12, I'm going to The Verdict from
Wow.
2019 with Todd LaTorre is on vocals. And also Todd does the drumming on this because Scott Rockenfield was MIA. Um, I'm going with the opening track, Blood of Levant. And I just think if you're going to open a record, this is exactly the way you do it. Full throttle, heavy, up tempo with soaring vocals from Todd. His drumming is just a beautiful combination of the style that Scott Rockenfield has created for Queensryche, but plus a little more modernized. Lots of real heavy fills, double bass work, really progressive cymbal work. And so between the two, I'm just in perfect heaven here. Produced by Chris Zeus Harris, and he's kind of become their staple guy. And it's nice because this is an album of tremendous sonic power. The whole band just sounds great. And even though it's all these years later, they have maintained, and even for this and some of their albums, they have gone back and reused a lot of the amplifiers that were used on earlier records to get the same kind of guitar tone that they had on earlier records, just modernized and updated. Um, he just right off the bat, he's just vocals are driving over the top of this. Lots of great, glorious harmonies coming on here, and they're double tracked, but they're still killer. There's a theme here is that their choruses are so melodic. They have so much hook to them, you can just whistle all of them, and this is no exception. They come into a nice little breakdown section with some marching drums that are coming on that are really, really great. And it breaks down into this nice passage of a beautiful bridge. Again, it's just all melody. And it just drives to the end. They've got a wonderful breakdown. It goes back to the kind of the opening theme, and they hit this great ending. and I'm like, this works for me. And I'm like, okay, this is really good. I was concerned, of course, with Scott not being there, what was going to happen, having not heard Todd drum before. But he was a drummer first, singer
Yep.
second. So I was super thrilled. My number 11, I'm going to stick with the same album. I'm also going to go with The Verdict, and I'm going with track number 3, Light Years. And this is just an old school style Queensryche riff with Eddie Jackson's bass just clean and thunderous underneath. Todd is just so good here. And the vocals are super, super strong. This track has a Rage for Order vibe for me. Um, and when you get to the chorus, pulling me down the undertow, it's dragging me down. I'm just, it's so melodic. It's just, but it's got beautiful, intricate guitar work. And that's one of the things that's so amazing about Queensryche is they don't play anything traditional. They dance in and out. They use broken chords. They use single lines and they duplicate a line or they embellish a line. So it's never just most of the time slam power chord, slam power chord. That's not how they work. And it creates this beautiful space. A really great dual lead section with the drums and bass just so forceful and foundational underneath. And it's just one of those tracks that makes me feel comfortable into old school Queensryche clothing. And it's a beautiful way to start my selection on two great tracks from the same album. So those are mine for now.
Excellent. That was unexpected. Two from The Verdict, two from
Yep.
a later period right in a row.
Yep.
Very impressed. And you did mention there Rage for Order, their second full-length album from 1986, and that's where I'm starting. I think this was the first Queensryche song I ever heard. I came in later than you did. I came in 1986. This is a cover song, the one cover on the album, and I'm sure EMI, their record label at the time, made them do it. And they used a song by Canadian songstress Lisa Dalbello. And at the time, she was a young singer-songwriter, and she reinvented her career with this song from a concept album called Woman 4 Says. And on her album, it was the first song, side one, track one, a song called Gotta Get Close to You. And Queensryche's version is 4.5 minutes long. And when I heard this, it sounded so different than anything. And I didn't have MTV at the time. So maybe I saw it on a channel we used to get here called U68, maybe Friday Night Videos. I don't remember because I don't think I heard it on the radio. I think I saw the video, which is now dated, but that sound grabbed me. And it was so different because they have those, like you said, although I'm not really a musician, I'm just a singer from back in the day, they have those guitars that sound so different from everyone else, and it's their own unique sound and style.
Right.
And you get the drums of Scott Rockenfield on here. And like you said, they're very melodic choruses, but even the drums are hooks. And the
Mm-hmm.
bass lines, Eddie Jackson's bass lines are hooks here. So this album eventually certified gold, Rage for Order. It hit number 47 on the charts. And even though the video clip is now dated, I wrote down that it's a claustrophobic, eerie feel that are propelled by Scott Rockenfield's drums. And Tate's vocals just soar through the stratosphere on this song, just the highs he hits. And with his keyboard work, and probably also from the producer Neil Kernan plays keyboards on the record, they add a bit of a menace to this song. And I always thought that this was a real song about a stalker, and it's way more obvious compared to The Police Every Breath You Take, which a
Right.
lot of people
I
use
use
as
it
a
weddings.
wedding song,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's
Right.
a song about a stalker. And they just don't see it. They just hear the melody and say, oh, it's a pretty song. It'll be our wedding song. But it's a song about a stalker. But this is even a more menacing and eerie song about a stalker. So I really like this song. So because of my history with it, and I think if I remember correctly, it was the first one I heard, I'm putting it at number 12. And I like almost at the 4 minute mark, Rockenfield does this turnaround. Brum, bum, bum, boom, bum, boom. Yep, he does that great drum part. It's a hook. And it's
Yeah.
towards the end of the song, right before the 4 minute mark, and then it just goes to the outro. So that is my number 12, Going to Get Close to You. Number 11, written by the great Chris DeGarmo, the much missed Chris DeGarmo.
Yes.
4.5 minutes, just under 4.5 minutes. In 1982, the quintet released their own indie EP. And with brisk sales, they eventually got their deal with EMI America. They re-released the EP through their major label in 1983 through EMI. And this was the first single and video that most people saw and heard from the band, like you did in 1982, but I wasn't there yet. And it is Queen of the Reich.
Yep.
And the band changed the spelling of their name because they didn't want to be associated with, so they changed it to the Y with the umlaut, CHE, Queensryche, at the spelling that we all now know 40 plus years later. So this is a fast, hard-hitting song, and you get Tate's high-intensity vocals and some blazing guitar work from, I wrote, the tandem tag team of DeGarmo and Wilton. And at this point, not many people had sung this high as Tate.
Mm-mm.
Maybe Plant, maybe you could say Ian Gillan. In fact, the song starts off, which I just realized in listening to these songs and the albums over and over recently, is that the song starts out the way Tate comes in with the multiple track vocals, just like Ian Gillan in Deep Purple's Highway Star.
Right.
It just never hit me before until recently. And I know you're super familiar with Deep Purple. You love them. You've done a lot of shows on Rock Daydream Nation about Deep Purple.
Yeah.
But to me, it almost mimics that intro, the whoa, and then he hits the super high note, which is maybe even higher than Ian Gillan used to
I
do.
believe it is. I think that may be a top E5.
That is super high.
Crazy high.
Where was I? Originally, back in the day when Dream Theater's first vocalist, Chris Collins, auditioned for the band, he auditioned by singing Queen of the Reich, and they gave him the job. Of course, it didn't work out, and they eventually went through other singers, got to James LaBrie, and the song's been covered by a few power metal bands. In fact, besides Rainbow's album from back in the day, this is also seen as a very influential power metal album. Like I said, they changed their sound over the years and over their records, got more streamlined, more song-oriented, but this is really power metal. And it all starts here with Queen of the Reich, besides Rainbow. So that is my number 12, Going to Get Close to You, and my 11 is Queen of the Reich.
Two great tracks.
Thanks.
Great tracks. And that video for Gotta Get Close to You is really creepy. It's just hard to watch. You're just like, ugh. They're in the bedroom, poking over the bed and and he's in the window, and you're like, oh, that is you're just like, that's a bit odd,
It's written by a woman.
Well, and they went through that phase, and as we get more to Rage for Order, we'll talk more about it. But they had this look for one period of time. I have a promo poster of the album cover. I mean, of the inside insert. So, which is fun. So let me go to number 10, and I'm going to go to 1988, and I'm going to go to Operation Mindcrime, and composition by Chris DeGarmo and Jeff Tate. And it's hard to pick some favorites over other tracks on this one. It's a seminal record for sure. But for my number 10, I'm going with Breaking the Silence. I think this is one of their more straightforward tracks on here. First I have to say that, they started a run of productions with Peter Collins and Jimbo Barton that is demonstration quality. These albums sound absolutely pristine. There's just enough edge and aggressive to it, but it's still really accessible. And every instrument is perfectly detailed. But this one starts out with energetic driving quarter note pulses. And then it breaks down, and you have this signature element of one of the things that Queensryche does best. They take a rhythmic motif, and it's typically between Eddie and Scott, and they just lock in like an absolute machine. And they just keep repeating this rhythmic punch underneath these very sparse, gentle guitars and Jeff's vocals. And it's one of the great examples of Jeff's lower range, which is also very rich and very lush. He's a natural baritone, not unlike Todd La Torre, who's also a baritone, but he has, and they both developed in a very, very strong extension into the upper range. But if you've had any interviews or anything you've heard of Jeff or Todd, they both talk much more down here. They're not, like you're not confusing him with Bruce, who's, who talks much higher.
Yes.
This is, I love the way they construct. Usually the verses will start out a little more sparse. They bring the drums in full, add a little more harmony to it. And one of their great choruses, breaking the silence of the night. Can't you hear me scream? And one of the elements that we miss, especially live, and we have to give credit here, is DeGarmo's backing vocals.
Yes.
Because Chris also has an exceptionally high voice, and he is doing most of the live upper harmonies, which today they just don't have, and you do miss them. There's a straightforward verse, chorus, and they get to this great driving solo section where they go back and forth a la Priest or Maiden between Chris and Michael, or Michael and Chris, whichever order it happens to be. But with the drums now much busier and with a much more in the bass drum, where he was just doing those punches and something much more simple and straightforward. And there's always a great little bridge moment in all of the Queensryche songs. Can't look back. It's just a waste of time. Can't erase the hate from my eyes, and then back to the chorus.
Right.
And I just think it's just very simple. It's concise. There's no extra frilly stuff. It's to the point, and it's done beautifully well. And I like, again, another tight ending. Da, 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 da. You know you did it. Why'd you do it? Why'd you do it?
Yeah,
then,
back and forth.
and then we're off to the next one. So Breaking the Silence is my number 10. And now for number 9, I am going to do it again. I'm going to go to the Queensryche self-titled, but from 2013, the first album that featured Todd La Torre. And I'm going with the 4th track called In This Light. Again, they were able to bring Jim Barton back to engineer. So there's a strong familiarity sonically to the vintage Queensryche era, and that helps all of the tracks on here. And for me, this one is just all about the sentiment and the feeling of the vocals with a very strong and very deeply emotional lyric and melody from Todd. I've read these. I'm not typically a lyrics guy. I'm usually learning every musical part first, structure, everything, and then if I've got room for lyrics, I go back. But I've walked down miles. I walked for miles down empty roads today, lighting the way the fireflies, unafraid. I try to escape and learn to survive. Somehow the rain changed me by surprise. And it's just this lamentive, where did it all go wrong? When will it go right? Someday. I've been searching for answers all of my life to rise above a jaded world that seemed to haunt me. And the chorus is very straightforward. I break the chains for you, but only to remind me. No preservation, no paradise. And it's just, you get another beautiful dual lead section with a great rhythm change from the drums and the bass here. It is just such a great, it's got a mind crime feel to it for me. And as soon as I heard this, it instantly became one of my favorite Reich tracks. So in this light from the Queensryche 2013 self-titled.
And you had, at that point, you had three of the original band members because
Yes.
Scott was still there.
Scott was there as well. That's
Yeah,
correct.
just Jeff and Chris were gone,
That's
singer
right.
and guitar player at the time.
Yep.
Okay, my number 10, I'm going back to an album that I mentioned before. Once again, Rage for Order, the third single, Walk in the Shadows, written by DeGarmo Tate and Mr. Michael Wilton also. I think it's a really good opening track. It's a swaggering hard rock metal song with great vocals from Tate and fiery fretwork from DeGarmo and Wilton. And I love the chugging riff and groove of the verses. And it sounds like DeGarmo and Wilton swap solos in the solo section, and then they harmonize right at the end. And it just adds a lot to the song. It's a great kickoff track to the album, and I like the abrupt ending on this song. So Walk in the Shadows, which was also probably the second Queensryche song I heard, that is my number 10. I'm going to go to an album you just mentioned from 1988, Operation Mindcrime, for my number 9, written solely by Mr. Chris DeGarmo, almost 6 minutes long, The Mission. And it was very hard picking songs from Operation Mindcrime to put in this list because I could have done most of the album and that would have been my top 10,
Right.
top 12, but it's almost cheating. And I like to spread the love around. But this is a perfect concept record. And The Mission to me is a little reminiscent of the Oracle section from Rush's 2112, the way it starts out. And I like the plaintive guitar vocal intro until the band comes crashing in. And this song conveys a large portion of the album's plot line. And Tate's vocals are stellar throughout this song. And the way he modulates, like you were saying, his voice, just that deep, rich tone, the way he starts off so low. And then just in the chorus, whoop, just elevates it. And it's just screaming to the heavens. And I like Tate's keyboard stabs on this song. Or could it be, because he's credited on the album, Chris DeGarmo on guitar synth? Because at the time, Priest and Maiden were using guitar synths, and the credits on the album say that Chris DeGarmo was playing guitar synth. So I'm not even sure if it's guitar synth or this song, or it's Tate on the keyboards. But it adds a nice little flavor.
Yep.
And this is one of my favorites from the album. So that is my number 9, The Mission, and number 10, Walk in the Shadows.
Two really great songs, Davey.
Thanks.
Maybe more on one or the other. We'll see.
Okay.
We get to number 8 for me, and I am still in the Todd La Torre era. I am now jumping to 2015's Condition Human. And this album absolutely just blew me away. Top to bottom, it's just vintage Queensryche for me. And there's a lot of tracks to pick up from here. But the track I'm going to pick at number 8 is Bulletproof. And not unlike Breaking the Silence, this is all about lyrics, melody, and mood and delivery. It starts out with a very simple, elegant, kind of broken down guitar part with Todd. But instantly, from the very first lyric, you get the sense there's something about this track that you need to pay attention to. How many times must we try? The very first line, lost in the gaze of your watering eyes. How many times have we questioned all that we've ever known? And I'm like, oh, where is this going? I stood right by your side, but my love was not enough. And I'm like, okay, I can relate to that, but it's the chorus that gives you the idea of where this is going. Now you're aiming, there's no use in waiting. you know the trigger's right in front of you. So pull it now and make a move. I'm bulletproof. Wow. And it just keeps going. And you're just feeling this emotion of these two people who are so at odds now. And they're just confronting each other with all of these things. And it just is so real. And it just comes down to this beautiful section. And it's got kind of these beautiful rage for order and warning like guitar solo vibe during the breakdown. And the backing tracks have these beautiful, subtle embellishments underneath it. But all of this is about how great Todd delivers the vocal and the lyric on here. And it's just, I mean, you sing this at the top of your lungs because it's just sweeping, and you could just feel it swinging back and forth rhythmically, which is a really great place to be. So Bulletproof from Condition Human. Number 7, now we need to get into Rage for Order. Chris DeGarmo and Jeff Tate. And I will say, well, I'll save that. I'm going to go with the track number 7, New Regal. And there are so many things in this track. And it's got this great kind of sci-fi acoustic intro, and then this weird kind of, and it all of a sudden hits this long, and you get between, and like I was saying before, this unison rhythmic motif between Eddie and Scott. Bam, bam, shh, bam, bam, shh, bam, 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 shh. And he sings, and that shh is his China cymbal. And I say that specifically because as we go along, I'm going to point out things. Scott is a master at using the China as an accent through songs. It's all over Mindcrime. It's been all the way back to the EP. And here he's using it to perfection. And so over that broken rhythmic motif, we get this slightly distorted vocal from Jeff, like he's kind of nasally and,
Yep.
and then, no, it's not a dream anymore. And then the drums change. And then it goes to the second verse. And now it's got some propulsion to it. And then it just builds and builds. And then the chorus just explodes, and it's just like, oh my God. And these thick harmonies, and they get another great dual lead section, lots of cool accents and China punches from Rockenfield. And then it just kind of builds, and then they have this little New Regal is here, and he holds that for seemingly days.
Yeah.
And then you have this other rhythmic motif. And they get to the very last one. How do you know it's the last one? The China tells you it's the last one. I think it's just a spectacular song. It's so progressive. There's just nobody that sounds anything like this band in this era and in this type of song. So that is my number 7, New Regal from Rage for Order.
Nice. More on that later. My number 8 comes from their gold debut album, The Warning. About a 5-minute song written by DeGarmo and Tate, Take Hold of the Flame. And this is a perennial fan favorite. Although the single didn't chart, the record peaked at number 61 on the US Billboard charts. And to me, this song starts with those guitars that just have what I call the Queensryche sound. And you explained it much better than I could, but no one has those chiming, ringing,
Yep.
acoustic electric guitar sounds. And you know, that's Queensryche. I hear it, I know it, and I love it. And that's to me what this song gives me. It's a haunting guitar sound, and it frames Tate's vocals perfectly until he hits that note and that Jeff Tate note. Wow. And then he even goes even higher. He does, I think, an octave jump, I guess.
It's crazy.
It's amazing. And he couldn't do it years later, but how can you? I mean, he was a smoker, unfortunately, which probably killed his voice a little bit, which is not the best thing for a lead singer, especially with that voice. But the way he jumps there, he stops and then goes higher. Holy cow. Amazing. And then the song kicks into gear. And although I'm not a huge fan of gang vocals usually that are in a lot of metal, hard rock, and metal songs, it works here because it's just an anthemic song and the gang vocals help convey that perfectly. So Take Hold of the Flame is my number 8.
Nice.
Moving on to my number 7, going back to a record you just said, but a different song from Rage for Order. This is one of the 2 songs that I'm going to mention tonight, not co-written or written by Mr. Chris DeGarmo. This is by Tate and Wilton, Michael Wilton on guitar. A little over 4 minutes. I Dream in Infrared is my number 7 choice here. And like I said before, I have written down in the 80s, Queensryche were tagged with the Thinking Man's Medal tag due to the unique subject matter of their material. And to me, it all starts here with I Dream in Infrared. I don't even know what that means, but it's just catchy and it makes you think, how is he dreaming in infrared? What does that mean exactly? To me, this song is about Jeff Tate, especially on the choruses. He simply soars above the fray. And this was the B-side of the second single from the album, The Whisper. The keyboards add a lot of texture and flavor to an already unusual song, especially those chiming sounds they add on the keyboards, which sort of mixes with the guitar to make that Queensryche sound that I was mentioning. And Wilton, I would guess because he co-wrote the song with Tate, he's the one who does the guitar solo here. And I like the guitar solo. It adds to the song. And it really stands out. If you've ever heard it, it's a bonus track now, the acoustic remix, where there are no real electric guitars except for Wilton's solo. And the fact that that's the only electric guitar, the lead, it just pops out of that song. And it's a really good version. So definitely, if you haven't heard it, check out, I think it's called Acoustic Remix of the song I Dream in Infrared. That is my number 7, and Take Hold of the Flame was my number 8.
Very good. Also, if our listeners haven't seen the Queensryche Unplugged, that's an absolute must see.
Yep,
Because everything sounds good. Number 6, I'm going back to Conditioned Human. Yeah, I like Todd. I like the Todd era, and they have a strong representation here.
that's great.
And I'm moved by what I'm moved by. This is a Wilton Jackson, Lunger, and Latore composition, and I'm going with the title track, the epic Conditioned Human. And if you want to encapsulate what the thinking man's analogy is, here it is. There's elements of Floyd, there's elements of early Queensryche, vintage Queensryche. You can clearly see there's a cross-pollination because some of the elements in here you could say were very present in Dream Theater's Octavarium and things like that are all kind of pulling from the same sources, and they're just taking them in slightly different directions. This is a very, very creative and very epic track. It starts with this beautiful, atmospheric, slow, and it's enveloping. It's rich, and Todd comes in singing at a very relaxed and comforting tonality. Do we ever stop and wonder what's around us? do we take for granted what some may dream to have? Powerful lyric. And as we keep moving, the band is still doing these beautiful kind of broken arpeggios, parts of chords, but not necessarily the whole tonality of the chord, something that they really mastered in Mindcrime. And they're doing it here beautifully. And now we go through a couple verses and we get this kind of a breakdown where all of a sudden the feel changes and we get a heavy, aggressive guitar tone with an up-tempo feel, and Todd is just soaring here, where he starts, welcome to a generation, divided unity of man, disconnected circuitry, pull the trigger on demand. And they go through an up-tempo section, and then they come to this beautiful broken breakdown section. Not unlike some of the more epic tunes on Mindcrime. And they've just got these single chord notes that just chime and naturally decay into the ether. And we get this rich, low baritone from Todd. Charade of broken frames, gathered pieces from the past, shape the species over time, moralities collapse. Millennia of holy wars suppress the meek and mild. Prophet of the corporate whores, who will teach the child? And the lyrics are very relatable to early political activism, worldview and everything. And I think, there's a huge credit to Eddie and Michael, because with the changes that have gone around them and a new singer, they're still able, and I do believe Todd really understood what he was doing as well, because he's involved with a lot of the writing here. But they were able to retain so much of that element, that what made that early versions of Queensryche so accessible and so recognizable, they're able to do this here. And they get a little distortion thing, and he gets to this one line, no reception tonight. And then it breaks back and builds and builds and builds. And then this absolutely release of tension and this soaring guitar solo from Michael Wilton that just gives me bloody goosebumps. And it is just so gorgeous. And I wrote down, this is Queensryche, full on epic. And it's just one last run through it up tempo to welcome to a generation. We're all conditioned human, meaning we all started out the same. Where have we ended up, and why and how? And is it good for the species? Is it not good for the species? But we all started with the same condition. We're human. And it's just progressive until the end. And it's just a spectacular track. And I'm going to couple that with one that you've already mentioned before, the Dharma solo composition from Mindcrime, The Mission. And this is, to me, is the epic on the record. It's always been my favorite track. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. And like you said, this beautiful chiming. You can see the rain. You can see the dilapidation around them. You can feel it. You can feel the moisture. It's seeping out of the vinyl. And Tate's baritone tone is so glorious. And then this break, 6 days ago, I was like, oh my God. And the keys, it's just a little bit of string use. And it's so subtle and it's not overused. And when we get to that, I wait for days longer. That's, maybe on record it might be Jeff, but live, that's Chris. Way up there on top if you listen to Operation Live Crime. And it just comes back to this beautifully classic Reich solo. Very sparse drums, but they still drive. And then it just picks up. And, when he gets to the section, I look around, my room is filled with candles, each one a story, but it ends the same. That's just Jeff being untouchable. It's just so perfect.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be high, or it's just how it's delivered. It's delivered with authenticity. It's delivered on dead on pitch, diction, emotion, feeling, and it just absolutely attaches. And the changes that this goes through, and man, could Chris write. You can talk about all the elements, his guitar playing, his vocal, his writing is what they missed the most. And that is where you can really hear the difference when we start to go through these tracks and we start going to Dharma, to Dharma, to Dharma. There may be Tate's in there or something, but it's Chris and Chris. So my number 5 is The Mission from Operation Mindcrime.
Okay. Good choices there. Great choices. And it's nice to see the love for the later period. So we go right from the beginning in through the 2000s, which is good. We have some differences in songs so far and a couple the same. My number 6 goes back to the early era, and it is their first epic song written by DeGarmo, Tate, and Wilton. It ends their debut full-length album. And I heard you mention this on another show recently on YouTube, Roads to Madness. That is my number 6. It's a near 10-minute epic, which was quite the bold move in 1984, because Rush wasn't even doing 10-minute songs. Their last 10-minute track was 1981 for Moving Pictures. So they streamlined and made 5-6-minute songs instead of their epic 10, 12 plus minute songs that they were doing. So for the debut album to have a 10-minute song to end the album was a big deal, but they pulled it off perfectly here. All 5 band members shine on this song, especially Jeff Tate and the rhythm section. Michael Kamen, who they used throughout their career, adds some nice orchestration to the piece to give it a little bit of oomph, but it's subtle and not too overbearing and gloppy like later on for the song Real World, which is a good song, but it's a little too much with the orchestration for my taste on that song. But here it fits perfectly on Roads to Madness. Both Rockenfield on drums and Jackson on bass add some great flourishes throughout the song, and it adds to the whole musical stew. The song goes through a lot of twists and turns over its 10-minute runtime, and Tate's choir-like backing vocals add a lot of depth and dimension to the track. There's a nice brief melodic guitar solo before the final chorus, and it leads into a long, mellow section, and then into the really fast section at about the 7-minute mark that takes the song out. So as a prog rock guy, as a huge Yes fan, Rush fan, etc., I had to include Roads to Madness. That is my number 6. Moving on to number 5, a song you mentioned already, written by DeGarmo and Tate, 5 minutes long, from the mighty Rage for Order, New Regale, which means new order in German. So could it be political? Could it be about machines taking over? You could look at the lyrics in a few different ways on this song. But I love the eerie synth opening, and then you get that Queensryche chiming acoustic guitar sound. And this is a definite standout, and it's an outlier because it sounds so different than any other song. Like you said, I have in my notes a definite outlier in their catalog. But I love that it's an odd, and there's some techno flavors, the way you said that Rockenfield hits the drums. I put love its odd techno flavors and nuances. It's very menacing and mysterious. And I dig that catchy electric guitar riff that's either ascending or descending, I'm not sure. The effects on Tate's vocals on the opening verse almost make him sound robotic. What leads me to believe that it's more about technology than a political song. It could be both. You could take it either way. There's a short but sweet guitar solo. And you could interpret the song multiple ways. Maybe it's the struggle of man versus machine. Could be other myriad choices on how to interpret the lyrics, but it's just the music that grabs me and it's very unique. And it's my number five. It's a song I always go back to from Rage for Order. So that is my number five, Roads to Madness, my number six.
Very cool. I will never have a problem with that track on anybody's list. We'll go to number four, and this one has been one that you have already mentioned. But again, it's a Chris DeGarmo alone composition, and this was the very first track from Queensryche I ever heard. We got the EP, we took it home, we put it on, and then we're like, and we're like, what?
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, that was cool, but then it just doesn't let up, you know? And it's probably the most purest metal track that they've done. There's beautiful but subtle interlaced double bass work from Scott in there. Sometimes it can be missed. The production is a little challenged, but that's okay. It's their first go around, and I'm more than forgiving for that. But then it's just like I go, just Tate unleashes pure magic here, you know. And then when I finally saw the video, and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, the video is kind of kooky, but I'm like, yeah, I'll just go back to listening to it because the video doesn't help me much. But it's just, Chris's backing on this is essential live for it to have worked back in the day. I love sometimes their bridges don't have to be long. It's just you're fading away, your life cast astray, a victim the beast shall obtain. And then what do we get? We get, like you said, this beautifully rhythmically precise dual lead with Chris and Michael. And it's not, and it's, first of all, it's so melodic the way it starts, and you can see them playing, and then it breaks down. And as soon as it breaks, Chris takes off. And then underneath, we get a lot of the double bass on the second parts of each riff. And then the over and over, here comes Tate again, just soaring over the top. And then when he sings the word pain, captive souls are screaming out in pain. You're like, okay, yeah. You're just like, who is this? Where have they been? And, we got it because the album cover looked cool. It was in a miscellaneous queue bin. Nobody knew who they were. It had just been released, and it was, as was the custom with my next door neighbor Joe and I, we'd hunt and we'd find it and we'd look at the back and go, this looks kind of heavy. And we're like, give it a shot. That was a win.
And it was
For
just
number
four
three.
songs.
Yeah, but it's okay.
Four songs on the EP.
Yeah, but it's okay. They were all great. And I played them a gazillion times. And so when I finally had warning that I could add something new to the mix, I was really happy. Number three, I'm going back to Rage for Order, DeGarmo, Tate, and Wilton. Going with my favorite. No, I lied. My second favorite track, London. And this one is another one that is just got so many great progressive moments to it. The breakdown of this beautiful just bass and drum with this just kind of a single strum. And again, you can you look at the title and you go, it was November 4th. When I last held your hand, it seemed our time would last forever. You already get the sense how lamentive he is and how mournful and how alone he feels. You said, don't ever leave. I thought you'd never go. I wish I could just remember your name. And it's just like, wow, very cool. And the moment when they get past the blood red streaks of velvet throats at night, and they change key and they change that chord. The street lights fanned our tale of fame, though in London. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes the whole song right there. It is just that tiny little compositional change in the chording that just gives this such a feel. And it's a slower track. And we get to these beautiful kind of licks in between these sections. And if you listen to what Scott is doing, he's got a lot of he's not driving straight through. He's not playing a standard beat. He rarely did. He was much more accent driven. Scott is one of the hardest drummers to copy.
Wow.
Because he doesn't play traditionally. You get a point, you think maybe it's eighth notes, boom, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba. He may do just boom, boom, boom. And you're like, wait, what? And you got to learn each rhythmic pattern that he does is just different for almost every song. He hardly ever repeats something. And you're just like, wow. So you can't just default to your experience and go, I think it's going to be this. You've got to actually sit down and really dissect it and learn it. And it just builds. And when he hits that higher vocal section, oh, there's some things in life I could never face. Nah, 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 nah. The worst is being alone. And you're just like, oh. And it just drips with emotion and feeling. And it's just so much cool breakdown. There's lots of great China work at the very end that you'll miss if you're not paying attention to it. But it's super creative and very, very subtle. And I absolutely fell in love with that track the first time I heard it when I got Rage for Order. So
nice. It was on my larger list, but it didn't make the cut, unfortunately. But I'm glad you mentioned it because Rage for Order is such a great record.
yes.
Before I move on, what do you think of Scott as a drummer? Like in the pantheon of drummers, you don't really hear his name mentioned like Peart and Bonham and the whole group.
Well, look, obviously Peart and Bonham are really great players. But I've always said popularity is only a sign of familiarity. It is certainly not a referendum on talent or lack of talent or anything else. It's just more people know who they are. Now you say, is that a product of because they are, quote, better? Well, you've seen enough shows with me. I'm not into better or best.
Right.
Scott Rockenfield is the perfect Scott Rockenfield, and nobody else plays like him. Nobody else sounds like him. And that is a small element with Casey, the new drummer. I believe that's his first name, on the current tours. Scott's a hard thing to replace. They did the hard part, replacing Jeff, and I thought they did an exceptional job.
Yes.
But the most difficult to replace after a singer is a drummer. And he's done a great job, and they still feel great. But Scott is Scott. And, he's got such a style. And, I was talking about the Chinas, when you listen to I Don't Believe in Love or anything, do that intro, or Eyes of a Stranger. He's doing dual rides, and then what do you hear? He goes to the two Chinas. It's just his signature. They're all over the place. He uses the China heavy before the first verse and Take Hold of the Flame. He's got China everywhere. And that's one of his calling cards. And very tight, very high-pitched snare drum. That's also a signature of his. And he also uses very small hi-hats, 13-inch. Not unlike Peart through most of his career, Stuart Copeland, guys like that. They're very articulate. They cut, and they allow you to do a lot of intricate dancing on them, and they speak quickly because there's not as much mass to have to move. But he's a tremendous player. Great feel, great sound, And I think he's in this absolute essential element to what made Queensryche Queensryche.
Excellent to hear. Is he up there in your list of favorites?
Oh, he's somebody who certainly influences me. I can't say I've ever, I don't play like him, not even remotely. Not that I have to play like a hero or an influence. Um, he's somebody I wildly admire. And even doing this exercise, when I've heard these tracks a gazillion times, I'm still discovering something new that he threw in here or that he did here. Some tiny little something, a syncopation that he threw in, and I'm going, wow, that was tasty. And you don't want to just sit back mindly and just go, yeah, he's back there bashing away. At least not me. I can't do that. I'm a drummer. So, where does he rank? I really kind of don't rank influences like that. But he's a seminal player, and he's got so much to offer. And he's certainly on the creativity chart is extremely high. So
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I
thank
appreciate
you
it.
for asking.
Moving on to my number four. This song came out in two versions, actually. There is the piano vocal version at a little under 5 minutes, and then there's the full band version over 7 minutes. The song ends with a question mark, and it is from Promised Land, written by DeGarmo and Tate. Someone else? Question mark. I
Mm.
know it's a little bit of cheating, but I really like both versions a lot. The piano vocal version is just very haunting. That ends the original album. And then the full band version was a B-side of like a European single, and now it's a CD bonus track. And it's DeGarmo on piano, on just the piano vocal version, and of course Tate on lead vocals. And it's just this heartbreaking ballad. Just lyrically, it tears you apart. And
Right.
the way it ends their 1994 platinum album Promised Land, it ends it in fine style. And I love it as the closing track on the record. And then the full band version is this excellent mini epic in their whole canon, their whole career. And I like DeGarmo's melodic guitar solo here at the 5 minute mark on the full band version. And Rockenfield's drums propel the song forward. My only minor quibble with the long version is that Tate is playing saxophone. And
Mm.
it just, to me, doesn't fit Queensryche. I saw the Promised Land tour. I remember Jones Beach here on Long Island, right near me. And Typo Negative opened up, which was just an odd double
That's
bill.
an odd, yeah.
It was, but you see some of those when you see a lot of concerts over decades and decades of seeing shows. And Tate had a sax, and he would play it on certain songs from Promised Land on stage. They had like a lounge area with some fans sitting on stage, which was cool. But the sax on that album, just one little minor quibble. This was the third single from Promised Land. It didn't chart, but it's a really good song. Either version, someone else, my number four. Coming in at number three, going back to Operation Mindcrime, such a hard album to pick songs from. But this song at a little under 5 minutes by Tate and Wilton. So there is no DeGarmo on this song, oddly enough. Lyrically, it's still relevant 36 years later, especially the day we are recording this, which is Election Day in America. And hopefully this video will be out by this coming weekend. Fingers crossed for that. The music really grabs me on the song, forgetting the lyrics and the whole political bent. Very political album, this whole Operation Mind Crime album, whichever way you look at it. But the music here grabs me. The twin guitars are the stars on this song. And of course, Jeff Tate's stellar singing. The unsung hero I wrote is Scott Rockenfield on drums and cymbals. Just the way he just moves the song forward with his heavy beats and his cool little fills and some great ride cymbal work I have written down in my notes here. And another central tune to the theme of its platinum parent album. So Revolution Calling, my number three, and Someone Else, my number four.
Excellent. That's a great album. And it's as relevant as it gets. There's a bunch of stuff on that album that still makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. Just that lyric line that he says, who do you trust when everyone's a crook? So relevant.
I've got no
38
love for
years, 36 years
politicians,
later.
all that crazy scene in DC. It's just a power mad town, right?
Yep.
You know, everybody making a sale. So number two is a track that you had mentioned. This is DeGarmo, Tate, and Wilton from The Warning. Pardon me. Give me a second to clear my throat here. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Roads to Madness. This is just like you said, you've heard me mention this before. This is just a stunning track.
Yep.
And it might be on a very short list if I was to try and show one person who had never heard Queensryche before, give them one track and give them a good overview of everything that they were capable of. This might be the track. It's kind of got everything, you know, and very kind of maudlin and sluggish kind of intro. Da, 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 and you're like, where's this going? You know? And then, like a lot of their tracks, it breaks down, you know, it's Jeff with very minimalistic backing, but it's super interesting and wildly creative. And then it just kind of builds. They add the drums. You get to the first kind of chorus section with those beautiful ahs behind them, which are kind of goosebumpy. Those are just always really cool. And Jeff is in such control of his voice. He's got such a smooth transition between all of his registers that he just has no breaks. He has no sections where you go, oh, well, oh, wait, no, no. It's just smooth all the way up, all the way to the highs, down to his lows. And you get to the second time through, and I love time's measure rusts as it crawls. I love that he adds all those extra S's on rusts. Um, and you can start to feel that the tension is building up a bit. He's a little more agitated than he was when he first started. And we get to this gorgeous solo section. And the one thing I wrote is that this band is never overtly or overly flashy simply to be overly flashy. They're not. They have got all kinds of technique. They've got chops for days, but they use them only when it needs to really suit the song. And that is a musicality and a musician's choice that shows to me extremely high caliber cerebral thinking because they're serving each song independently
Yes.
and saying, what does this need to convey what we need it to do with as little that we can put into it to achieve that. And what it does is it creates so much space and it leaves the palette so wide open that when they do something like as this gets later on, they build up the speed and the tempo, and all of a sudden it's got so much more impact than if the song had started full on and was heavy but just changed tempo. The tempo itself would be a systematic change, but it's a textural change, it's a context change, it's an intensity change. It's all of these things that make it seem just so much bigger. And that's a beautiful way to do it. Just add an extra instrumentation, add a new kind of way to play your chord or your riff, or add a different drum beat. And they're so perfect at it. And when they get to the last section, stay on the course, you'll never find the answer to a place where darkened angels seem lost but never found. Oh my God. And then you get to the end and it just, seeing light at the end of sight reminds me I've passed away. And you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. And you're just like, wow. And it just kind of gives you a little chance to decompress. And it just has enough of an outro
Right.
that just lets you kind of go, which I think is compositionally beautiful. So Roads to Madness is an absolute epic track. My top has always been my top ever since I first heard it. Rage for Orders, by far my favorite Queensryche album. It's not even close. I'm going with track number 3 again, written by Mr. DeGarmo and the Mighty Whisper. This to me is just a masterpiece. And if you want to talk about the uniqueness and the brilliance of Scott Rockenfield, it's right here. Everything he does in here is unconventional. Everything. When they start the verse, cries from the aisle, the tolling of the judgment's bell, Scott is playing all accented upbeats, and the bass drummer going, but his hands going, not unlike Everybody Wants to Rule the World. Think about that for a second, folks. When you hear that, it's the same kind of feel. And when he does it on here, it is ridiculously hard to play, super hard to play. And then when you get to the chorus sections, when he plays it straight, and now it's just like, oh, we're on familiar turf, and it just rocks like crazy. And all he did is switch from the upbeats to the regular beats, and now it just feels spectacular. And you get to that little section in between, bringing it back to the verse.
Yes.
Tate is soaring through this. It is a very simple but kind of straightforward song. Ridiculous lead work. A bunch more cool China punches from Scott in here, and then we get to the end. What do we get at the end? And we get a China and then a gong at the end. And there's no better way to end anything than with a gong. A whisper.
Just like Queen used to.
That's right. That's right.
Great choices.
Thank you.
Okay, my number 2, approximately 8 minutes long. It's another song in their catalog that ends with a question mark, written by DeGarmo and Tate. Anybody listening? And this is the last song on Empire.
Right.
I put another mini epic at nearly 8 minutes long. Eddie Jackson's bass playing is excellent on this closing song from their 3 times platinum album Empire from 1990. The proper song is about 6.5 minutes long, and then it ends with about 90 seconds of ocean sounds, and you hear a conversation. I'm not sure what they're saying. Could it be the protagonist in the song commits suicide by walking into the ocean? I'm not really sure, but there's some real nice subtle percussion touches from Rockenfeld throughout the song. It's another eerie masterpiece, and it's also on the MTV Unplugged. If you watch the full show or listen to it, you could find it. So Anybody Listening is my number 2. My number 1 is their big, big epic song by DeGarmo and Tate from Operation Mindcrime. It could only be Sweet Sister Mary, with guest vocalist Pamela Moore as Sister Mary, and the actor, British actor who's no longer with us, Anthony Valentine, voices the evil protagonist, Dr. X. And this is an ambitious prog song with a capital P, I wrote down. This 10-minute monster is a tour de force of everything that makes the band Queensryche. The choir and the strings, conducted and done by Michael Kamen, again brings gravitas and a haunting, macabre atmosphere to the song. I just love this song. It's the centerpiece of Operation Mindcrime. And although I said it's hard to pull tracks from this album, this is my favorite Queensryche song due to its epic proggy nature. So my number one, Sweet Sister Mary. Number two, anybody listening?
Excellent. Yeah, two great tracks.
Thanks. Hey, we have a few minutes. Would you like to mention some honorable mentions?
I would very much like to, because I want to mention this record that I hadn't mentioned in my other picks. I'll do these in a more encapsulated style. 15 and 14 both come from Empire. And, I will say categorically, there are few records that sound as good as this record does. You mentioned Eddie's bass playing. His bass sound on this is demonstration quality. It is simply opulent. It is resplendent. I'm going to use every one I can come up with. And if you get the 20th anniversary, it's even better because they've even cleaned it up even more. It is stunningly clean. The drums are enormously huge, but everything's in its place. The two tracks that I'm going to do here, first one is Della Brown.
I knew you were going to go there.
This is just one of those one of those tracks that is so straightforward. Three basically verses and two one-line chorus transitions. That's it. But the story is spectacular. Got a cardboard house, live there all the time. Keep your memories tied with string. And it goes through big city bound, gonna make your mark. Read your name in the lights, all the ads and people say, tried your best to prove them right. Della Brown, she's seen it all. Hard to choose whiskey over wife, And talk about everything in this song is based on that rhythmic motif. Down, 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 down.
The bass.
Down, 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 down. Doo-doo. The whole song is built on that. And the guitars just dance all around it with this beautiful, subtle little extra hi-hat that he throws in there. And I just think this track is just stunning. And I had mentioned before the Unplugged, this Unplugged is goosebumps, major goosebumps.
I agree.
The other one is Best I Can. I think this is a stunning opener. I love the keys, with the little chorus, a child alone in daddy's room, and then bam. And then you get a full sense of how sonically huge this record's going to be. And, we get to and I won't let it go. We've got such driving eighth notes from Scott underneath. And then he pulls it back, it goes down underneath. They get this awesome progressive section in 7. And, Dream Theater, Rush, Floyd, you can go on you want. Yes, you got to learn to play in 7, folks, if you're going to be progressive. And this is just, oh my God, the solos and the way Scott dances in and out of it rhythmically is very reminiscent of Peart, during Red Barchetta or Natural Science or any of that kind of thing. He's on that level and he's just dancing around the beat, never playing something totally straight, but adds a punch, but it's so creative and it's so glorious. And I think that is just, and I mentioned that the keys have a very won't get fooled again kind of feel to them. And you're like,
Yeah, you're right. The synth line, never thought of it that way.
It's a little hooish. It's a little hooish.
That was on my larger list, best
Yeah.
I can, but it didn't make
and this is the one I want to talk about the most because I have to pick something from Promised Land, and you had touched on it. And this was the hardest one to keep off my list. I'm going with track number 4, Out of Mind. Ugh,
Good one.
talk about mood, atmosphere, beautiful, sparse acoustic playing, very minimalistic drumming, but with a very intense, loud snare drum when it does play, you know? And then it just kind of breaks down. And what Jeff, little girl sits in the corner, locked in a stare, and you're just like, oh my God. Like a lot of their other tracks that I love, the more moody ones, it's got almost a 6/8 3 feel. It kind of swings, even though it's, more traditionally in 4/4. But you can make that swing because 12/8 is really 4/4, but you can, if you emphasize the triplet instead of the eighth note, it'll swing. And it's just like, oh. And all of this is about Jeff's vocal performance here. When you hear those rich backing vocals during the chorus, and it's just, and you get that one section, you left them there for me. And this gorgeously gripping guitar solo that barely changes notes very often, but it is just searing through my soul as I'm listening to it and going, this is where the elements of Seattle come through to me in spades. And, we look at the year, it's 94. Obviously, they were from there.
Yes.
This has all of those slight little Alice in Chains, those little things, not nearly as heavy or anything like that, but Alice in Chains had very subtle and gentle moments too that were eerie and creepy and glorious. And I think this is just an absolutely stunning track of minimalism. And it's not about singing high. It's not about fast guitar licks. It's not about big drum fills. It's about a composition that between lyrics and melody and harmony create an atmosphere that is just absolutely sucks you in. And if you do that, I'm all aboard, and I was on this train the moment I heard it.
That's a great choice. A good deep track, really good deep track.
Great song.
And a lot of the songs on Promised Land are like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it didn't do as well as the previous record. It may not be as accessible. It's a little deeper from the lyrical point of view and the music point of view.
Right.
It doesn't hit you with the sledgehammer. It makes you think and ponder, what are they talking about? Why is it mellow? And what are they trying to convey here?
Well,
So
it was
that's a
also
really
4
good
years
choice.
later, too.
Pardon me?
It was also 4 years later.
That's true. 90 to 94, which was a big space back then.
4 years in record time is forever.
It's an eternity, yes. Yeah. Okay, my honorable mentions. Number 15, written solely by Mr. Chris DeGarmo. Once again, Rage for Order, I'm going back to the well. And I don't even think it's my favorite Queensryche album. There are just such amazing songs on it. The last song on Rage for Order, yes, is a chiming, atmospheric, largely acoustic-based song from the much-missed Chris DeGarmo. This soul-stirring number has some nice whistling by Jeff Tate.
It does.
It has a hook. It's a nice hook. And this is the first song they did on MTV Unplugged. Check it out. I will remember. It's haunting, it's soul-stirring, and it's an excellent song. My number 14 is an odd choice. It's a B-side. And this band have some very cool B-sides.
Some really good ones
that were not on the records. And I'm not even mentioning that great cover of Scarborough Fair, which everyone should go check out.
I love that.
Really cool the way that builds. And I shouldn't talk about it because then I'm going over my allotted song limit here. But I'm going for a different song. And I remember back in the day when I was working at Titus Oaks Records on Long Island, a couple of coworkers, friends of mine, we went to see a movie at the drive-in, the Westbury Drive-in, which is no longer there. Now it's an indoor movie theater. We saw a film by a guy who was hot in 1990 by the name, a comedian of Andrew Dice Clay. He had one movie that he starred in called The Adventures of Forrest
Adventures.
Fairlane. And Queensryche have a very cool song written by DeGarmo and Tate on the soundtrack, just a hair under 4 minutes, Last Time in Paris. And this is kind of different from everything else in their catalog because it's like a riff rocker. It's a short song and it's all about the guitar work. I wrote it's a riff rocker with some nice guitar work from DeGarmo and some nice vocal ad libs from Jeff Tate. And this is the only song on my list that charted on the Billboard Mainstream Rock chart in 1990. It hit number 27. Last Time in Paris, a really good rock and roll song from Queensryche to prove that they could do what everyone else could do. They don't have to do a thinking man song. They could just do it
Right.
in the box rock song. And it's
Right.
still just those guitar riffs. And DeGarmo's almost like a slide type work on the song. Love the guitar work on Last Time in Paris. Check it out. My last song, my number 13 song, DeGarmo Tate composition, just a hair under 4 minutes long, from Rage for Order. Once again, The Killing Words.
Yeah.
And this is a power ballad with a great anthemic feel. And it's got this great lift from the chorus from the verse into the chorus. It's got this beautiful lift where it just soars. This is the second song on the MTV Unplugged performance. Check it out. There's a really nice guitar solo from DeGarmo with a cool little dive bomb in it, I think. Not that I know the technical terms, but that's what I think he does on that song. So those are my honorable mentions. I will remember Last Time in Paris and The Killing Words. So there you have about close to 30, 25 or so great songs from Queensryche. My initial list had 30 tracks on it, and I was being conservative when I put 30 tracks because I said, I can't believe I'm not writing this song down. And
I
in
was
the
past
middle
I was past 50.
holy cow. See, if I wasn't conservative, I would have had 50, 60 songs. But to whittle it down, this was very hard.
Very
I just
difficult.
did a Dream Theater show, my favorite songs with my friend Jenny, and that was hard also. But I think this was even harder to whittle down because I had 40 to whittle down to 12, 15 on that show. But this show with 30 going into 12 or 15, this was really hard.
Was.
And I thought ranking the albums was difficult. And this was just, oh, I can't believe I'm not putting that song from Mindcrime, that song from Empire, and leaving out all these great songs. So definitely explore these albums. And like Pete did, you got to check out the later period stuff. That's really good also. And because Pete mentioned so many songs from the Todd LaTorre era, I'm going to have to go deeper into those albums. I've given them cursory listens and they're good, but they just can't crack my top tunes list. But they're still really good songs and everyone should investigate it. I'm going to do that myself. So I want to
Yeah,
thank.
you have to just be open-minded. If anybody is in the no Tate, no Queensryche thing, don't bother because you're not open to it. I have no problem if that's your preference. There's more than enough Tate stuff for you to listen to the rest of your life.
Yep.
But I'm just saying, if you just go and listen with open ears and an open heart and embrace the stuff that you loved about Queensryche, give them a shot. For me, it was instant attachment. I had no trouble whatsoever.
Because they sort of
Someone
went
else may be
back to
different.
their earlier sound,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
which is what most of the band wanted to do, and Tate didn't want to do, so they parted ways.
Right.
Musical differences.
Yeah, and kudos to Todd because it's singing Jeff is hard enough.
Oh yeah.
It's we've got who do we have? We've got the people who try and replace Halford, Tim Owens. He's done a beautiful job. Tim's a great singer. Blaze had his challenges doing Bruce, and Todd is doing his yeoman's work. And when you concentrate on material that's how many decades old now? It's and it's a predominantly older material in some cases. They just came off a tour where they were playing all of the Warning and the EP. That's unbelievably difficult to say.
Yeah, very
Jeff
high.
never did anything like that. So give him credit.
Definitely. So check out the Queensryche catalog. It's there on YouTube. It's on Spotify. You might have the CDs or the records in your collection, maybe even cassette tapes. Who knows? I'd like to thank Pete for coming on. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming on, sir.
Thank
And
you.
Pete will be back on the channel. We'll be doing some shows together next year. We've spoken about it a little, but we'll see what happens next year. So thanks for coming on, Pete. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Davey.
And I want everyone to rock out, prog on, roll and rule, subscribe, like, comment, tell us your favorite Queensryche songs. You could list 3, 5, 10, 20, whatever. There are no rules in the comments below. We'd like to read some of your favorite Queensryche songs. So thanks again, Pete. Davey Cretin. Oh, before we go, do you want to promote any shows that you're doing on other channels? I'm sorry.
Thank you. I've just had a lot of stuff that comes out here and there. Mostly, I've had some spots on John Clauser's My Music Corner. I was part of the Judas Priest series, and I did my bit with Restless and Wild on the new Up to the Limit, the AC Accept. I've done quite a bit of stuff with Peter Kerr on Rock Daydream Nation. We kind of have a continuing Deep Purple series that we do. We're recording something else coming up here soon. And I'm had a lot of Contrarian stuff that I did recently. So I'm kind of just taking a small break there and getting out of the way so others have a chance to partake. And so I'm always grateful when people like yourself ask me to participate. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and thanks for the idea for the show.
You're welcome.
Queensryche, excellent band. In fact, the first time I saw them, they were opening for Metallica back in the day. That's why I wore the shirt. It
Yeah.
was on Metallica's and Justice for All tour,
Yep.
and they were touring Operation Mindcrime at the time. Before they did the whole thing, they were just doing songs from all their records up through Mindcrime. So it was a
Yeah.
good mix. And then on the next tour for Empire, that's when I saw them do all of Operation Mindcrime, which was stellar.
That's a band from 86 through 91. I don't think I'd want to follow on stage. Just me personally.
Yeah,
They were absolutely in their prime and kind of untouchable.
precisely.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. We'll see you guys soon. Take care, be well, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.